Ricci. Tonight, we begin at Nathan Phillips Square, where events continue to honor residential school survivors and the children who never returned home. Across the country, Canadians are marking the third National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. Here in Toronto, it started with a sunrise ceremony. Olivia Bowden has more.
As the sun rose, dozens of Indigenous groups made their grand entry into Nathan Phillips Square for the annual Indigenous Legacy Gathering. The event is hosted by the city and Toronto Council Fire Native Cultural Centre and features a market, speakers, and teaching events.
Pay attention. Open up your eyes and actually see what we're doing. We're not just selling orange shirts.
These women who run the Thunder Woman Healing Lodge Society hope visitors understand the event is meant to raise awareness.
We're not just selling arts and crafts. These are our people. This is how they make a living. This is what our ancestors taught us to do.
At a stall next door, Frances Sanderson, the executive director of Anishinaabe Homes, is speaking to community members. She says it's been encouraging to see school children be aware of the generational trauma wrought by the residential school system.
So if you educate those young ones, by the time they get to be adults like you and I, they're going to have a knowledge and they're going to have actually a more of a passion for doing something so that it never happens again.
And amid the art, jewelry, and clothing being sold, Indigenous community members like Frances had a clear focus of ensuring the enduring impact of residential schools isn't forgotten.
We're hoping to educate, and that's really the prime focus.
Dozens of organizations and vendors have come out today with a message of wanting the public to be more educated about the ongoing impacts of the residential school system. And this marketplace here at Nathan Phillips Square today is just one of multiple events across the city. Crowds visited Union Station Saturday afternoon to watch the Toronto Open, an Indigenous dance competition. It showcased the Jingle Dress Dance, which features traditional powwow regalia and dance for women. Marley Fairfield Stats is one of the competitors. She, along with family and community members, helped create her dress, which includes intricate beadwork.
This is a healing dress, and so it's the sound of the cones. It's like the healing component. So when we dance, you can hear those cones jingling.
And organizers say the event is also meant to highlight the resiliency of Indigenous peoples and longevity of their way of life. Olivia Bowden, CBC News, Toronto.
This federal holiday recognizes the legacy of Canada's residential school system and the harm it caused and continues to cause. Marina von Stackelberg has more now from Ottawa.
The names of Indigenous children, one after another, on a banner stretching on and on. They never returned home from residential school. Through records, the National Centre for Truth and Reconciliation has identified more than 4,000 children who died.
The NCTR continues to work with churches, governments, and others so we can finally access the 23 million records that were not released to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. We know more children will be found and their names will be added.
Honoring that ongoing fight led by survivors to identify more of those missing children.
I am here and not with my mother, but I was with her when she identified dozens of unidentified children in photographs at the Roman Catholic Archives.
Those who survived still feel the legacy of having their language and culture taken away from them, suffering widespread abuse.
Today we remember and we must talk about what happened to those tens of thousands of Indigenous children, including my parents, subjugated, humiliated, stripped of love and care, state and church-sanctioned violations against them that we all must now live with.
And today, a recognition of survivors and their families that fought for decades to have Canada's dark past brought to light.
We honor all those who broke down those barriers to education, to teach our true history of Indigenous peoples that was erased for generations.
And honoring those who help survivors and their families heal and continue to heal from trauma.
I would encourage us to double our efforts in advancing reconciliation. How? Where there's hatred, let us sow love.
Without love, there's no healing. And what each and every one of our survivors pray for as we say this prayer from our heart today, let us show that love to the survivors. And we thank the Creator for blessing us with such a beautiful day.
Marina von Stackelberg, CBC News, Ottawa.
You're looking at the site of the former Mohawk Institute Residential School in Brantford. It's being converted into a special space to honor survivors. We'll bring you there a little later on in the show. Turning to other news now, and starting tomorrow, Ontario's minimum wage will increase by over $1. The province says this will help workers offset the rising cost of living. But some experts aren't so sure about that. Tyler Cheese also spoke with workers about what this increase means for them.
Starting tomorrow, Ontario's minimum wage is increasing from $15.50 to $16.55 an hour.
I'm glad there's some movement in that direction because it's certainly hard to live on a minimum wage with 9% inflation.
The increase puts the province at the third highest minimum hourly wage behind the Yukon and British Columbia. But with most Ontarians feeling the pinch of rising inflation, experts say this increase still isn't enough.
It's hard. Canadians are everywhere feeling that everything is expensive, and it's like if we're making more money, that's great. If it doesn't get us more, then it doesn't matter.
We're seeing, all the prices around us go up. And so if you're making minimum wage, there is no way that you are making ends meet.
While in favor of the increase, workers' rights advocate Dina Ladd says minimum wage should already be higher than it is.
The Ford government has definitely not been a friend to workers. As soon as they came into government in 2018, they cut the minimum wage and froze it for 2 years. So part of what we're also seeing right now in terms of people struggling to survive is the fact that the minimum wage should have actually been closer to $18 right now.
Candivel Panopulam has worked as a security guard for 12 years. He's only ever been paid minimum wage in that time.
Every item is going day by day going up. So it is very difficult to manage in my basic salary.
It's stories like his that have people calling for an increase to $20 an hour.
The living wage across Ontario right now is about $20. In the Greater Toronto Area, it's more like $23. And that is based on the idea that you're living with somebody else who's also making money, really. If you're a single person trying to rent a one-bedroom apartment in Toronto, you need to be making $33 an hour. So half of that, $16.55, is nowhere near what you need to be making. When you start from a low base.
In a recent news release, the province said it will continue to deliver steady and predictable annual increases to help families offset the rising cost of living. Tyler Cheese, CBC News, Toronto.
York Regional Police have a warning tonight after responding to a string of overdose-related calls in Newmarket. 4 people were assessed for suspected overdoses on Friday. A 35-year-old woman has since died. 3 others are expected to survive. Authorities are reminding the public of the dangers in consuming street drugs, adding some of them might unknowingly contain highly potent substances, enhancing the risk of an overdose. Now to the Ottawa region, where the reopening of a major transit line has been delayed again. Service throughout the Trillium line was halted in the summer of 2020. Construction had started to extend the line from Ottawa's airport to the Riverside South community. The project, already more than a year behind schedule, was expected to be completed in November. Now, OC Transpo, the Regional Transit Commission, is saying it won't be welcoming passengers until at least April 2024. It says some of the issues include training operators and delays testing the trains on the line. Kim McDonald joins us now from the Weather Network, and it's definitely feeling more like midsummer and not the last day of September.
It's like summer's grand finale, Talia. Wow, what a beautiful day for ceremonies. It was 24 in Ottawa, 22 in Toronto. And I just want to look back at, because we're at the end of September, we have barely seen any rain, at least not at Pearson. So 10.2 millimeters, that is all that fell the entire month of September. That's 15% of normal. Compare that to July and August. July, we saw 138% of normal rainfall. So it was a very soggy summer, but September was not that way at all, very dry. And that trend continues. We're under what's called an omega block. Sometimes we're on the wrong side of it, the low pressure on either side, but we're right under that ridge of high pressure. And that means those dry conditions continue for the next few days. In fact, it's likely going to be a warmer start to October than it was to July. Temperatures are going to soar mid to high 20s. And even in northern Ontario, we're going to see temperatures likely pushing 30 degrees. Normal daytime highs around southern Ontario, about 17. And again, watch for that fog in the early morning hours, especially London towards Windsor and then around Cottage Country, but it should burn off fairly quickly for a nice afternoon.
Thanks, Kim.
You're welcome.
Well, it's not the news that Jays fans were hoping for. The team lost today against the Tampa Bay Rays. But as Philip Leshanek reports, there is still hope for the Jays to clinch a playoff spot.
They have a lot of guys who get injured.
One win and they're in. If the Blue Jays win one of their final 2 games against visiting Tampa Bay Rays this weekend, they're going to the American League East playoffs for the 2nd year in a row. It's her first ever Jays game and she's got high hopes.
I hope they win and they get to the playoffs.
It's also the first game for this Jays fan, whose first name is Jay. He came from Korea to see Hyunjin Ryu pitch.
I've only watched this on TV, and I'm actually in here, right? I really like the vibe here.
Because of some uneven play late in this season, the Jays could need some help to make it to the playoffs. If they lose tonight, they could still clinch if the Seattle Mariners fall flat against Texas this weekend. The Blue Jays split their last homestand of the season here against the New York Yankees, but have since bounced back to win their last 3 games in a row, beating the Rays last night. And the fans here say they're going to get it done today.
Today. We want to see it.
I was praying they didn't do it last night, so it'd be a little more exciting today.
Fans hope the Jays' playoff fate is settled heading into the final day of the MLB season. The nightmare scenario would be if the Jays lose both games and the Mariners sweep their series. That could see a 4-way tie, not something fans want to consider.
We're winning, Seattle's losing, we don't need nothing tomorrow.
Of course, last year they made it to the postseason after a long drought, only to make an early exit swept by the Seattle Mariners. Fans hope that they have a better showing and make it to the World Series for the first time since 1993. Philip Leshanek, CBC News, Toronto.
Hundreds got out for some road hockey action in Vaughan today for the annual Princess Margaret fundraising tournament to conquer cancer.
Now here is something that's going to change. Thank you, Coach. Remember, you must be of legal drinking age and maybe asked.
More than 1,800 players participated this year, many of them to honor a friend or relative who battled cancer or who faced cancer themselves. Organizers say the tournament has raised over $30 million for research since it started. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Next, we'll take you to Brantford, Ontario, to the site of the former Mohawk Institute Residential School. It was the longest operating residential school building in Canada. Now it's a space that focuses on preserving and strengthening Indigenous language and culture. A warning, this story contains some distressing details.
Frankie served time here, 11 years, too many. It's all along this brickwork here, but also on all the other areas of the building on the backside is people have carved their names. Part of the work that we do at Woodland Cultural Centre is to talk about the history of the residential school. We do that both through in-person tours and virtual tours. Just the very fabric of the building, the material of the building has a connection for survivors and is important to survivors and to their families. So we're keeping even those little bits like the bricks that we have to remove or replace, we're keeping them all right there. That's my family, my uncle. The building behind me was the former Mohawk Institute Residential School. It's the longest operating residential school in Canadian history. It actually predates Canada's existence, operating from 1831 until 1970. And this is the third building on the property. The former two buildings were burnt down, so this is a 1903 building. There's work to be done in terms of putting back all of the cooking equipment. The building itself will reopen to the public next fall, and people will be able to go through and experience stories from survivors and their firsthand accounts of being here at the Institute. This institute in particular has the nickname the Mush Hole, and it's because at times the students were fed oatmeal 3 times a day. Their storage here, the dry storage, wasn't very good, so sometimes it had bugs in it, and they were still made to eat it. If they didn't eat it the next meal, it was still there on their plates. And the older girls did work in the kitchen preparing the food. We're in the third stage of 4 stages of construction. So we've got about 2/3 of the building completed. We're putting an elevator in this fall, and next year we'll get to put in a ramp up to the front entrance. We also have some of our offices in the building. So we have a language department that works on language preservation and promotion. We have our education department, and we also have an extensive library and archive, one of the largest collections of Indigenous authored material, certainly in the province, probably in the nation, in one location. So it's a reference library, and it'll reopen in the fall as well of 2024. So this used to be the girls' sewing room. One of the places that we see the evidence of those children and their experience is even in the furniture. They're kids at the end of the day. Terrible, terrible things done to them, but they were still children. And so just like kids today will write in a textbook or, carve something into their desk in school, it's the same thing. Our second building on our site was also part of the Mohawk Institute. It's a 1950s building that was used as classroom and gymnasiums, and that's where we have our permanent galleries and temporary galleries. So we have a broader history about Haudenosaunee people, Six Nations of the Grand River Territory, and also the history of the residential school. And then we pair that with contemporary art exhibitions so that people don't just see us as victims. Residential schools are something that happened to us, but they aren't all that we are. We also really like to celebrate all of the accomplishments of folks from Six Nations of the Grand River, Wata and Tyendinaga, our support communities. And so that includes people like Robbie Robertson. So we have his Juno here and one of his guitars. We were really, really fortunate that we had Robbie Robertson as the honorary chair of our capital campaign committee. And of course, Robbie has a long history with his mom being from Six Nations. So he has a personal connection to Six Nations, but also because he was a performing artist. And part of the work that we do at Woodland is to support the next generation of those performing artists. And when he passed, his family asked that in lieu of flowers, donations be made to Woodland Cultural Center. So we're, I think, getting close to around $60,000 now. It's been really uplifting, I think, for us, and I hope for his family as well, to see that support from all over the place.
Support is available for anyone affected by residential schools. You can call the 24-hour National Crisis Line for access to emotional and crisis referral services. That number is 1-866-925-4419. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Now, as you saw earlier in the show, part of Union Station was transformed today for a jingle dress competition hosted by Fall for Dance North. I spoke with the executive director and award-winning dancer Freddie Gipp about the significance of this event.
Exciting about it is that it's the first of its kind. This competition is really nice because on the day of on September 30th, the dance originally is like a healing dance too, so it really has some really nice components for, the ultimate theme of the day too, which is National Day for Truth and Reconciliation as well. Our biggest thing is that, we're just trying to be a platform. We're trying to help people tell their stories, regardless of where they come from, who they are, what they do. With powwows and its style, the dancer and the singer, they represent themselves, their families, and who they come from. And so it's nice to be able to be that platform for them to showcase, the opportunity of our culture as well. Because not a lot of people are familiar with like Native American, First Nations, Indigenous, and Métis culture, but you know, it's really exciting to just to be able to be here in an area where traditionally is not supposed to happen.
So when people come to Union Station and they see it full of dancers, what do you hope people take away from that, and what conversations do you hope they're having afterwards?
Yeah, so I really hope people kind of understand, you know, why this is happening. I want them to be like, dang, you know, Union Station's really, you know, moving forward, you know, towards, you know, cultural expression, cultural resiliency. And at the same time, I want people just to have fun, you know, recognize that, you know, while we're still here, you know, there's portions and there's platforms, you know, available for people and resources as well. Because this day is just all about awareness. And so having the Union and Fall for Dance North be a part of this is just, you know, just a little step in a bigger overall problem.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Kim's back now with our extended forecast, and it sounds like we have more summer-like days to look forward to.
Can you believe it's October? Here we go. October 1st on Sunday, Talia. And yes, another beautiful day. If you like it like this, 23 degrees for a daytime high. Our normal is 17, so we're well above normal. Our record is 29.5, and that was way back in 2002. Our normal overnight lows, I should say, are 6 degrees, and we are going down to about 16. So we're in this weather pattern for the first several days of October. Not much of a change. Watch for that early morning fog. That would be about as bad as it gets. Maybe a little cloud cover in the afternoon, but it's dry. The thing is, in the long-range forecast, things are going to change dramatically. So when we're talking about the first 7 days of October, we could be setting records. This could be the warmest start in 100 years. Just incredible. Chance of temperatures going above 25 degrees. Our best chances are Tuesday and Wednesday this week. So if you're trying to close the pool, if you want to mow that lawn, this is the week to do it. Or maybe you just want to swim in your pool. Don't let me stop you. Just do that. Because after Thursday, temperatures are going to change. That's when everything shifts. A big cold front is coming through in time for a Thanksgiving weekend. So Thanksgiving weekend won't be nearly as warm or as sunny as the days leading up to it. So this is the time to enjoy if you like to be outside. But you know, if you're cooking a turkey, you may want it to be a little bit cooler, a little bit unsettled. Maybe that doesn't bother you. But this week we could be breaking some all-time records. Even in Northern Ontario, the record right now, 27.7 degrees from 2011. We're likely going to break that. Temperatures in the south, we're not likely going to break these because all-time records are in the low 30s, but a warm week nonetheless.
Thanks for that, Kim.
You're welcome.
And that's our show for you tonight. As we say goodbye, we leave you with a somber but deeply moving moment on Parliament Hill today. The red memorial banner bearing the names of the children who didn't make it home from residential schools carried through the large number of people assembled there. Thanks so much for watching.
Until